The grand chamber of the celestial conclave was silent. The rulers of 100 worlds sat in stunned disbelief, their shimmering robes and bioluminescent crests frozen as if time itself had halted. Hushed whispers rippled through the hall, disbelief mixing with outrage. Some clenched their hands into fists. Others simply sat in wide-eyed astonishment. At the center of it all, standing tall on the polished dais, was Princess Seraphina Vale-Theron, the last rightful heir of the Valari Dominion. Her silver hair cascaded over regal armor that bore the scars of battle, and her golden eyes shimmered with defiance. She had returned from exile, from the abyss of war and despair, standing now in the very heart of galactic power, proclaiming a truth that no one in that room had ever dared consider. Beside her, standing in stark contrast to the ethereal beauty of the princess, was a human. A warrior clad in battle-worn armor, his presence an affront to the noble decorum of the conclave. His name was Captain Doran Kane, a soldier of Earth's fledgling star forces. He did not bow, did not fidget, did not tremble under the weight of alien stares. His gaze remained firm, his posture unyielding, as if he had stood in halls like this 1,000 times before. But he hadn't. No human had. The Valari people had once ruled the stars, their empire stretching across entire sectors. They were warriors, scholars, diplomats, untouched by war for generations. Yet now, their capital lay in ruins, their fleets scattered, and their future hanging by a thread. And the one responsible for saving their last princess, the one who had brought her home, was a mere human. The weight of Seraphina's words still lingered in the air. I claim the throne of Valari, and I do not stand alone. I stand with the one who saved me, the one who saved us all. A human. A dozen dignitaries rose at once, voices overlapping in protest. Unacceptable. A mere human cannot be trusted. The throne of Valari is sacred. Seraphina's gaze remained steady as she raised a hand, silencing them. You speak of tradition, of purity, of honor. And yet where were those ideals when the syndicate forces came for us? When our own noble houses betrayed us? I was left for dead. Our fleets abandoned us. And in my darkest hour, when all others had turned away, it was him who fought to bring me home. She turned to look at Kane, her eyes searching his as if drawing strength from the unspoken bond between them. When I was captured, I was nothing more than a political prize to be bartered. I was beaten, humiliated, and left to rot. My own people did not come for me. But a human did. Kane remained silent, but his eyes flickered with the ghosts of battles past. He had led the charge through the burning wreckage of syndicate strongholds, torn through enemy defenses with sheer, relentless determination. He hadn't done it for politics. He hadn't done it for a throne. He had done it because it was right. A voice broke the silence. High Chancellor Veldrin, a wizened Valari with a gaze sharp as a blade, rose from his seat. His expression was unreadable. And what do you ask of us, Princess? Do you mean to tell us that this human should stand among us as an equal? Seraphina lifted her chin. No. I say he is already our equal, whether you acknowledge it or not. And that terrifies you. A ripple of murmurs spread through the hall. You fear humanity because they are not bound by our traditions. You call them reckless, but I call them relentless. You call them unpredictable, but I call them unbreakable. And you call them dangerous. She turned fully to face the assembly, her voice ringing through the chamber. But I call them our future. A heavy silence followed. Kane finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. I didn't come here for power. I don't care for your politics, your throne, or your titles. I came because Seraphina is my friend, and I don't leave my people behind. His gaze swept across the chamber. You all talk about honor, but I've seen real honor. It's not found in words or bloodlines. It's found in actions. And right now, the only person in this room proving they deserve to rule is the woman standing beside me. The chamber erupted again. Some in support, others in fury. The old ways were fracturing, splitting apart like a dying star. But Seraphina knew one thing for certain. This was the beginning of a new era, and humanity was here to stay. The chamber still trembled with the weight of Seraphina's declaration. The old guard of the Valari Dominion sat in stunned silence, their carefully constructed order unraveling before their very eyes. Even those who had once doubted the princess now stared at her in something close to awe. And then, chaos erupted. A counselor in flowing crimson robes slammed his fist against the gilded table. This is an outrage. A human? At our side? Another, a sleek-scaled diplomat from the Irani consortium, leaned forward, her reptilian eyes narrowed. The princess speaks the truth. Where were the noble houses when the syndicate invaded? If not for human intervention, Valari Prime would be nothing but dust. A delegate from the Ascari Dominion scoffed. Humans are dangerous. They act without regard for consequences. If they take root in our politics, they will spread like wildfire. Kane sighed and folded his arms. You say that like it's a bad thing. The murmuring stopped. 100 pairs of eyes turned to him. You all sit here in your robes and gilded chairs, pretending the galaxy still works the way it used to. But it doesn't. The syndicate didn't care for your traditions. They didn't bow to your treaties. They took what they wanted, and you let them. Kane's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. The voice of a soldier who had fought and bled while others debated. You call humans reckless? Maybe we are. But when one of us gets knocked down, we get back up. When one of us is in danger, we don't waste time arguing, we act. And when one of us is left behind, we go back for them. No matter what it takes. Serafina felt a quiet fire growing in her chest as she watched him speak. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't speaking in flowery political rhetoric. He was simply telling the truth. And the truth was shaking the foundations of the galaxy. High Chancellor Veldrin, who had remained silent until now, finally stood. His face was unreadable. Princess, he said slowly, you propose something unprecedented. A future where humanity stands alongside us. You are asking us to change centuries of tradition in a single moment. Serafina met his gaze, unwavering. Change is coming whether we want it or not. The question is whether we embrace it or let it crush us. The chamber was silent once more. Then, a soft chime echoed through the hall. Everyone turned as a holographic screen flickered to life in the center of the room. The image it displayed was terrifying. A syndicate dreadnought, its jagged, monstrous hull emerging from the void of space. And it was heading straight for Valari Prime. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Veldrin's expression darkened. This council is adjourned. We must prepare our defenses. Valari generals rushed to their stations. Officers barked commands into their comlinks. The capital world was scrambling to react, but they were too slow. Kane was already moving. Serafina, he said, turning to her, we need to get to the command center. Now. She didn't hesitate. The old Valari might still be struggling with the weight of history, but history wasn't going to wait for them. As she and Kane sprinted from the chamber, one thought rang in her mind. This was it. The moment that would define everything. The moment the galaxy would finally understand what it meant to stand beside humanity. And she would make sure they never forgot. The air in the palace corridors was electric with urgency. Alarms blared, signaling the approach of the syndicate dreadnought, its massive silhouette now visible in Valari Prime's sky. The shimmering energy barriers protecting the capital flickered as planetary defense systems came online. But Serafina knew it wouldn't be enough. The syndicate wasn't just launching another raid. This was an execution. Kane stormed ahead, his pace unwavering, his mind already calculating the next move. Your people have orbital defenses, right? Yes, but they weren't built for an attack of this scale, Serafina said, matching his stride. The syndicate has never dared attack Valari Prime directly. They shouldn't have the forces for this, unless... Kane's expression hardened. Unless they have help. They reached the command center, where a massive holomap of the system flickered above a war table. Admirals and strategists stood in frantic discussion, but as soon as Serafina entered, the room snapped to attention. High Admiral Vayari, a veteran of 100 skirmishes, turned sharply. Your Highness, we detected the syndicate fleet breaking through the outer perimeter. They disabled our sentry stations without firing a single shot. Serafina's stomach clenched. That's not possible. Unless... She turned to Kane, realization hitting her like a plasma blast. They had inside knowledge. Vayari's expression darkened. My thoughts exactly. Someone within our military ranks must have disabled the early warning systems. We were blind until it was too late. Kane crossed his arms. That means they won't stop at an orbital bombardment. They're coming to take something, or someone. His eyes locked onto Serafina. She exhaled sharply. They want me. The room fell silent. Of course they did. The syndicate didn't take well to embarrassment. Serafina's escape from captivity, the fact that a human had stolen her from their grasp, had made them look weak. And the syndicate didn't tolerate weakness. Vayari straightened. We have fleets mobilizing. If we focus all firepower on their dreadnought, we may be able to break their advance. Serafina studied the tactical display. No. If we throw everything at the dreadnought, their smaller attack ships will slip through and land ground forces. This isn't just a bombardment, it's an invasion. Kane leaned over the war table, analyzing the enemy formation. Then we need to change the battlefield. Serafina arched a brow. What do you suggest? A grin tugged at the corner of his lips. We stop playing defense. We take the fight to them. Silence. Vayari looked skeptical. You mean launch a direct assault on the syndicate fleet? That would be suicide. Kane shook his head. Not an assault. A surgical strike. We punch a hole in their formation, board their command ship, and take out their admiral. Cut off the head, and the body falls apart. Murmurs spread through the command center. It was bold, risky, utterly insane. Serafina's heart pounded. And yet, she found herself smiling. This was exactly what she had come to expect from Kane. Humans didn't just survive against impossible odds. They thrived on them. She turned to Vayari. Prepare an elite strike team. We leave in 10 minutes. The admiral hesitated. Your Highness, this is far too dangerous. Serafina's golden eyes burned with determination. I wasn't asking for permission. For the first time in years, she felt alive. 10 minutes later, aboard a sleek Valari assault cruiser, Serafina and Kane stood side by side, suited in combat armor. The strike team behind them was composed of Valari elite warriors, handpicked for this mission. Each one wore battle-hardened expressions, but none could deny the tension crackling in the air. The plan was simple, or at least as simple as hijacking a syndicate dreadnought could be. The cruiser would punch through the enemy blockade, deploy them directly onto the enemy flagship, and from there, they would fight their way to the bridge. As the ship prepared for its jump, Serafina turned to Kane. Are all humans this reckless? He smirked. No. Some are worse. She shook her head with a chuckle. Just try not to get yourself killed. Same to you, princess. The ship's thrusters ignited, launching them toward the greatest battle of their lives. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The assault cruiser rocketed through the void, engines burning white-hot as it cut a path toward the syndicate dreadnought. The enemy fleet had begun to spread out, launching fighter squadrons to intercept, but Serafina's forces were faster. Inside the ship, the strike team stood in tense silence, gripping weapons and securing armor plates. Every warrior here knew the stakes. There would be no retreat, no second chances. They were either victors or ghosts. Serafina tightened the straps of her Valari battle armor, the gold and obsidian plating shimmering faintly under the dim interior lights. Her pulse was steady. This was her moment. Beside her, Kane did a final check on his gear, securing his mag pistol and plasma blade. His combat armor was distinctly human, practical, scarred, and built for function over form. Yet despite the aesthetic differences, he looked every bit as ready for war as the Valari elites standing beside him. You ready for this? He asked, shooting her a sideways glance. She gave a small smirk. I was born ready. The ship lurched as it entered the battle zone. Through the reinforced viewport, they could see the massive syndicate flagship looming ahead, a fortress of black metal and pulsating red energy, its hull bristling with cannons and hangar bays spilling out waves of enemy fighters. The dreadnought dwarfed their cruiser 100 times over, but size wasn't everything. A voice crackled over the comms. Impact in 15 seconds. Brace for breach. The strike team locked in. Serafina exhaled slowly. Kane did the same. The ship slammed into the dreadnought's hull, sending a violent shudder through the cabin. Magnetic clamps locked onto the enemy vessel, and a cutting laser immediately began slicing through the hull plating. Then, the doors blasted open. The Valari strike team poured out first, weapons blazing, catching the Syndicate defenders off guard. A storm of plasma fire erupted in the corridor as enemy troops scrambled to react. Serafina moved with lightning speed, her twin energy blades flashing as she cut through two Syndicate warriors in an instant. Kane followed close behind, unloading precise, deadly shots with his mag pistol before switching to his plasma blade for close combat. The hallway became a war zone. Syndicate enforcers, monstrous and heavily armored, retaliated with savage force. Explosions rattled the ship as the battle intensified, but Serafina and Kane fought with perfect synchronization. A human and a Valari, side by side, carving through the enemy ranks. Which way to the bridge? Kane shouted over the chaos. Serafina activated a holomap on her gauntlet. North corridor, up 2 levels. Then let's move before they throw something nastier at us. They pushed forward, gunning down Syndicate troops as they advanced. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the ship as the enemy tried to mount a proper defense. Then, the floor shook violently. Kane cursed. What was that? Serafina's comms crackled. Your Highness, enemy reinforcements are inbound. They're diverting power to the ship's core. They're going to self-destruct rather than let you take the bridge. Her eyes widened. We have to disable that sequence. Kane gave a dry chuckle. Of course. Because stealing a Syndicate flagship wasn't hard enough. No time to argue. They ran. They burst into the reactor chamber, a massive, circular room pulsing with unstable energy. A towering Syndicate warlord stood waiting, clad in obsidian armor with glowing red veins pulsing along its exoskeleton. Admiral Zalzor, Serafina's greatest enemy. So, the lost princess returns, Zalzor growled, his voice like crushed stone. His burning yellow eyes flicked to Kane. And you bring a human? How pathetic. Kane twirled his plasma blade. Funny. That's what the last guy said before I put a hole in him. Zalzor let out a deep, inhuman laugh. You think you can stop me? This ship is already doomed. And so are you. Serafina lunged first. Their blades clashed, sparks flying as energy crackled in the air. Zalzor was fast, his monstrous strength sending Serafina skidding backward as she barely blocked his next attack. Kane darted in, striking from the side, but Zalzor caught his wrist and hurled him across the chamber. Kane slammed into a console, groaning. Stay down, human, Zalzor sneered. This fight is beyond you. Kane coughed, wiping blood from his lip. Yeah? That's what people keep saying. Never works out for them. Serafina pressed the attack. Her blades flashed in rapid succession, forcing Zalzor onto the defensive. But he was too strong, too fast, and the timer on the reactor kept ticking down. 1:45 left. Kane saw it. If they didn't end this now, the ship would be lost. With a sharp breath, he pushed off the ground and ran straight for the exposed reactor console. Zalzor's eyes flicked to him. No. Serafina saw the opening. She twisted her grip and drove her blade through Zalzor's chest. The warlord staggered, letting out a choking growl as golden Valari steel pierced his black heart. With a final snarl, he collapsed. Kane reached the console and started ripping out conduits, overriding the system with brute force. 10 seconds left. Almost there. Kane gritted his teeth, fingers flying across the controls. Serafina gripped her blades. If he failed, if this was it, at least she would die fighting. Then, the timer froze. The red warning lights flickered off. The ship was saved. Kane let out a sharp breath. Okay, let's never do that again. Serafina laughed, exhausted but triumphant. Agreed. Their comms buzzed. Your Highness, the Syndicate fleet is retreating. The dreadnought is ours. She turned to Kane, chest rising and falling from the battle. We won, she whispered. Kane smirked. Told you. Humans don't lose easy. As the Valari forces secured the bridge, Serafina knew the truth. This wasn't just a victory. This was the beginning of something greater. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they weren't leaving. The battered corridors of the captured Syndicate dreadnought were filled with the distant echoes of blaster fire and the heavy boots of Valari warriors securing their victory. Smoke still clung to the air, the scent of scorched metal and ozone a testament to the fierce battle that had unfolded. Serafina and Kane stood side by side, catching their breath in the reactor chamber. The faint hum of the ship's core was the only sound between them as the realization of what they had just done sank in. "We actually did it," Serafina murmured, almost as if saying it out loud would break the illusion. Kane gave a lopsided grin, wiping a smear of blood from his brow. "Not bad for a reckless human, huh?" She chuckled softly, exhaustion creeping into her voice. "Not bad at all." A transmission crackled in their earpieces. "Your Highness, we have secured the bridge. The remaining Syndicate forces are surrendering." Serafina exhaled in relief. They had taken the ship. They had turned a suicide mission into a decisive victory. But she knew this was more than just a battle. The moment the Syndicate fleet had begun their retreat, the entire power balance of the galaxy had shifted. Kane ran a hand through his damp hair. "So what now? We just stroll onto the bridge and tell the crew we're their new landlords?" Serafina smirked. "Something like that. But first, we need to send a message." The journey to the command deck was swift, Valari warriors parting as Serafina and Kane passed. The wounded were being tended to, Syndicate prisoners corralled into containment zones, and engineers were already assessing the damage to the ship. When they reached the bridge, the vast viewport revealed the breathtaking sight of the battlefield. Syndicate ships in full retreat, Valari reinforcements securing the wreckage of their fallen enemies. Serafina strode forward and activated the central holo communicator. The galaxy needed to hear what had happened today. She took a steady breath before speaking. "This is Crown Princess Serafina of the Valari Dominion. The Syndicate has been defeated. Their forces have fled, and their flagship is now under our control. The old ways of fear and subjugation end today." She paused, glancing at Kane before continuing. "And to those who still doubt humanity's place among the stars, let this be proof. They are not our inferiors. They are not outsiders. They are warriors, survivors, and they will stand with us in the battles to come." Across the bridge, Valari officers exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from skepticism to understanding. The weight of Serafina's words was undeniable. Kane leaned against the console, arms crossed. "Well, Princess, you just made history." She turned to him, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "So did you." The transmission was sent. Across the galaxy, people would see this moment, the moment humanity's role in the future of the stars was solidified. There was no turning back now. The war wasn't over. The Syndicate would regroup, and other empires would have their own opinions about this sudden shift in power. Challenges lay ahead. But for now, as Serafina and Kane stood on the bridge of the stolen dreadnought, watching the stars stretch endlessly before them, one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. The transmission spread across the galaxy like wildfire. News of the Syndicate's defeat at the hands of the Valari Princess and her human ally sent shockwaves through every empire, every council chamber, and every warlord's throne. For some, it was a beacon of hope. For others, a warning. Serafina stood at the center of the dreadnought's bridge, watching as holograms of various leaders began appearing on the comm channel. The Valari High Council, the Irani Consortium, the Ascari Dominion, even factions that had remained neutral were now paying attention. A grizzled Valari counselor, his expression unreadable, was the first to speak. "You have forced our hand, Your Highness. You have declared, in front of the galaxy, that humanity is our equal, that we will stand together." Serafina straightened, her golden eyes unwavering. "I have not forced anything. I have only revealed what is already true. Without humanity, I would not be standing here. Without humanity, the Dominion would have fallen. They deserve their place at our side." Another voice cut in, this time from an Irani war chief, her scaled face thoughtful. "There will be consequences, Princess. The Syndicate is wounded but not dead. They will return, and they will not return alone." Kane exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, I figured as much. Bullies don't like losing." The counselor narrowed his eyes at him. "And what would you have us do, human? Do you think your kind can win against an empire that has ruled through terror for centuries?" Kane stepped forward, his usual casual demeanor replaced by something colder, more resolute. I don't think we can win. I know we can. He looked around at the gathered leaders, his voice steady. We've been underestimated before. We're new to the galactic stage, sure. But back on Earth, history is full of stories just like this, where the strong think they can crush the weak. And every time, it ends the same way. He gestured toward the defeated syndicate fleet outside. We rise. We fight. And in the end, we win. Silence hung in the air. Then, one by one, the hollow images blinked off. The leaders had heard enough. Now, they would decide what came next. Serafina turned to Kane. That was risky. He shrugged. I'm starting to think that's just how we do things now. She smirked. Perhaps. But I hope you're right. Because if the syndicate comes back with a full invasion force, we'll need more than just words. Kane leaned against the command console, gazing out at the vastness of space. Then we'd better get ready. Over the following weeks, Valari Prime transformed into a fortress. Ships were repaired, defenses strengthened, and alliances forged. More humans arrived, not just as soldiers but as diplomats, engineers, and strategists. For the first time in history, two species that had once been strangers now stood as allies. The syndicate did not strike immediately. They were wounded, humiliated. But everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they sought revenge. One night, as Serafina stood on the palace balcony, gazing at the stars, she felt Kane's presence beside her. He didn't speak at first, simply watching the endless void as she did. After a long silence, she said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you never found me? If you never set foot on that syndicate prison world?" Kane thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No, because if it wasn't me, it would have been another human. That's just who we are. We don't leave people behind." She turned to him, something unspoken passing between them. Trust, respect, something deeper, perhaps, but that was for another time. For now, they had a galaxy to protect. As the distant stars shimmered and the threat of war loomed on the horizon, one thing was certain. This was not the end. This was the beginning of a new era. An era where humanity and the Valari would stand together. And the galaxy would never be the same again.